We could do these versions. Yeah. So I wanted to do page 14. I know it seems like we're just jumping around from text to text, making these 1,000-year leaps, sometimes 2,000 or 3,000-year leaps historically. Yeah. That's fun. Okay. And then eventually you'll be able to go back to the beginning of time or to the end of time. And that's a big leap. Okay. Okay. So we're just getting a little more flexible. Why can't you just stick with one historical period and one text? Okay. One guru. Okay. Sorry. Flexibility. So these are just selected verses, 4 selected verses because there's too much paper. Context. Oh, Aparokshanubhuti. Yeah, this is a text attributed to Shankaracharya, from who lived from about 650 to somewhere between 650 and 800, AD, and who was the famous non-dualist philosopher, and he was the founder of these different temples or mats or ashrams. There are 4 of them in the 4 kind of corners of India, and then he had many students, but 4 of them took over the mats, and but they were also called then, I'm the Shankaracharya of that mat, okay, and which then led to later on the appearance of what some people who are stuck with this history stuff, going too much schooling, and they say, well, this text couldn't really have appeared in the 8th century, as you claim, because they hadn't done this or that, and then they attribute it to when similar terminology was being used, and I suspect sometimes they're correct, but then we go back and we start digging through, early literature, and we start to find that, in the old days, they certainly knew a lot. So one example is the idea of Kundalini being, Kundalini is quite a modern, well, she's pretty present in the present moment. But the term or the idea of the serpent, the coiling and kunda, which means to coil up like a snake, okay, and is like something new that is kind of appeared, in the 13th century, perhaps. And but if you go back and you look at early Vedic things across, across India, Southeast Asia, and then all the way across to the Mediterranean area, where there was, at a certain point in the 7th, 6th century BC, connection, because it became one kingdom, the Persian kingdom. A lot of the art, is all about coiling snakes. And the body, and the human body of, sculptures and artwork of people sitting there with snakes coiling around. And then ancient myths like the churning of the ocean, where the gods and the demons had to cooperate. But don't worry, they were clever politicians, okay? But they had, each god had to find a like shadow, which was painful. It was like a kind of part of Jungian analysis. They had to go under, they lie on sofas and go through, talking about their shadow demon who was like, but they each one had to own their demon, and then they grabbed and they wrapped a snake. They even had snakes in the old days before, and they wrapped the snake around Mount Meru in the causal ocean 3.5 times. 1, 2, 3, 1/2, because you gotta pull it from both ends. Does that remind you of anything? And then they threw the great mountain in the causal ocean, and it started to sink, and that was a problem. And so they did this, it was a lot of work to arrange for this, but they wanted to make nectar like anybody, because this whole thing about death, somebody had just informed them about impermanence. Oh, did you know that everything's impermanent? Okay, this was like getting warmed up for Buddhism, and they're going, no, it's the last thing, particularly the gods. The demons too, they were more honest about their fear, and the gods were like, we'll work this out, the manipulation of the markets and stuff. And so they had to call on Vishnu, who used to sit on the top of the mountain to do something, and he appeared as a turtle, a tortoise, which was and this tortoise was a fairly large one and swam up and held up the mountain. So this was the big precursor for the, what's holding up the universe. It's just a big turtle. Don't worry. And turtles should instill confidence, because they're very cool, as you know. If you've ever had a pet turtle, they take their time, and they're really good at yoga, especially Parajaya. They can withdraw their senses and just wait. And they might have to wait for a few months, but it doesn't bother them. And then they can come out and do their thing. Anyway, and so they started churning, and out of the ocean, there are many versions of the story, but a pot of nectar was brought out of the ocean. Right? And so this is an old story. And then, of course, the demons, being demons, right-wingers, no, what was the, okay. And they stole the nectar. That was their plan the whole time. And because they didn't want the gods to get it, because the gods were always defeating them in things. And so they stole it. And then one of them, named Rahu, flew up in the sky and kind of laughed. Ha 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 ha. Gotcha, idiots. And then he started to drink the nectar. And this would have been a disaster. Because then the demons would take over the world. They've tried many times, but they would really take over. And so Vishnu, again, people said, look what's happening. He goes, oh, and that's when he sliced off the head of Rahu. Just as he touched the nectar to his lip, he lost his head. Whew. We're lucky, but you can see that whenever you see what you think is a lunar eclipse, those astronomers think, well, that's the shadow of the earth, because the earth is big. No, that's Rahu starting to drink the nectar, and thank Vishnu that because he has no body, as soon as he starts to swallow the moon, it then pops out the other side. But his head is immortal. And so you're going to have lunar eclipses. What are those? Lunar eclipses. Not, yeah. Just, this is the real, yeah. Sure.
You mentioned Persians before, and now we're talking about demons and gods. Could you clarify the flip that happened in Zoroastrians, where for them, Ashura are gods and Devi are demons, where in India it's the other way around? To try to find explanations for that.
Oh, I think it's just language.
Because the main god in Zoroastrianism, Ashura Muslim, where Ashura bad guys in.
Yeah.
India.
Yeah.
We don't do-
Maybe even to this day. That's why the Ayatollahs, they're envious of their predecessors. But actually, the Zoroastri, there's still about 900 still old temples that are considered like protected areas, but there's usually often on hilltops, where the wind circulation is nice, and they were used for fire sacrifice. And if you were an archaeologist and had a shovel, you could have a great time if they'd let you into the country. Okay, maybe in a year or two. But anyway, this was when, I forget the Persian king's name, the one who conquered, who let all the cats out on the battlefield in Egypt. Because the Egyptians worshipped cats, and so they thought, oh, we can defeat these Egyptians who are into like mummies and cats. They're really creepy. But we would love to have that territory. And how can we do it? And so they got a whole bunch of little cats and kittens, and they just put them out on the battlefield. And all of the Egyptians says, these cats are sacred. We can't, and the Persian just came in and said, ha ha, tricked you. These things still go on to this day. Things don't change. Where were we? Oh, so this text is actually believed by many to be slightly more modern than the original Shankaracharya would. And so Shankaracharya is also what developed there is what's called the Sri Vidya Tantra, which is he has a strongly non-dual school, and the Tantra that developed then is called Sri Vidya. And there's some really wonderful texts, such as the Sandhya Lahari of Shankaracharya. And then people would say, well, he didn't actually write Sandhya Lahari. But then you read it again and you think, somebody did. And I'll take it.
Yeah, and when they're in, when this is this idea of lineage, these are people who at the very least have studied and had some yoga on the teachings of their main teacher, and therefore, in a sense, it is what he's saying. It's this interpretation of what he might have said.
I remember getting Patavi Joyce to talk about Sandhya Lahari because it's considered it's a very secret teaching, as is the tantric practices that he was initiated into, it turns out. And so one time he was staying in Boulder, was it the second time he came? I had a copy of the Sandhya Lahari in Sanskrit, which I was like, really, like, this is really cool. So I put it on the bookshelf at the house that we had gotten for him to stay in.
Just happened to be there.
Yeah, just somehow that book happened to be there. And then we go over and visit him, and like arrange for meals and things. And he knew the entire text by heart. And also his wife, Amaji, she knew the entire text by heart. And so he was quite like, somebody's actually interested in this. And so he was very pleased. So he communicated a little bit of it. And but who knows if the original Shankaracharya, or maybe Shankaracharya, who is deep down the Paramatman, as all of us are, reappeared through the descendants, and in the 12th century or the 13th century composed this. And then this book, this is like a beginner's guide to the metaphysical paradoxes that systems give. And so, let's say we didn't include the whole text in here, did we? No, it's an invitation to you. It's not in here. No, not the whole thing. 67.
Well, maybe we did.
Maybe I
We
did.
thought about it. We also,
Maybe
we
did.
thought of an online version that,
Oh, this
Did
is
we
the
do it?
entire text.
oh,
I can't believe that.
thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we didn't give you the Sanskrit for it. Okay.
That's,
So what you're supposed to do is you read this and you go, I wonder what it really says. Okay. Then you got to learn Sanskrit. But hear this. So anyway, let's look at it. Where it came from. It's kind of cool. So we don't know where anything actually came from anyway, ultimately. Like, where did the present moment come from? You start to say it and you're choked on the Varodopsin. Okay. Om Shri Harim
Shri Hari
Paramanandam
Paramanandam
Upadeshtaram
Upadesham
Ishwaram
Ishwaram
Vyapakam
Vyapakam
Savalokanam
Sarvalokam
Karanam Tam Namamyaham. So that's just the introduction. I bow to Sri Hari, and Hari is usually interpreted as Vishnu. And so this is the Ishvara, who is the teacher of teachers. Similar, just as in the Yoga Sutra, you got if you surrender, Ishvara Pranidhana will give you all of this taste, the initial taste of samadhi, and then that'll start you on the great exploration, in which you also, and in that exploration, you'll have to forget all your concepts of Ishvara. And so it's like, to get closer to Ishvara, you got to forget the concepts. Okay. Oh, that's skipping ahead in the Yoga Sutra. Okay. So then, let's get really nice. This next one is what you could chant as yoga students in Mysore class. You just go up to them. Okay. Assuming you don't have to wear a mask, maybe one day. Sukhinaiva
Sukhinaiva
Bhavet Yasmin
Bhavet Yasmin
Najashram Brahma Chintanam
Najasram Brahmachintanam
Asanam
Asana
Tat Vijaniya
Advijaniya
Karat Sukhanashanam
Sukhanashanam
Yanmulan Savabhutanam
Yanmulam Sarvabhutanam
Yanmulam Chittapandanam
Yanmulam Chittabandhanam
Mulabandha Sadasevyo
Mulabandhas
Yogyapso Raja Yoginam. So these two. So asana. So what asana does is it gives you complete insight into Brahman, Brahmachintanam, and it flows. So this insight Brahmachintanam, it just flows like a river. It's just like, that's enough yoga pose. Okay. And in the river, you might wiggle a bit. Okay. Not that which destroys one's happiness. Sorry about those yoga poses. Okay. And this would also apply to asana as contemplative posture in meditation practice. That asana too, yeah. So not that which destroys you. And so this is a pretty radical text, because you got to figure that a lot of offshoots historically at different times have become quite, mean. Like, you got to do this. And then the teacher is like, smacking you down and just controlling you. Then making you drink Kool-Aid. Ultimately, you know the story of Kool-Aid? There was a famous yoga ashram. Any Texans? Okay. No, there was a famous yoga ashram called, what was the name of it? Yeah. What was the name
I
of
don't
that?
remember the name of his
Ash-
ashram, but his name was Jim Jones.
Jones. Yeah.
Jonesville, that's what it was. Jonesville.
Yeah.
What was it? Jonestown.
Jonestown. Right.
Jonestown.
Yeah, that
Oh,
was
it's-
a great yoga ashram.
Yeah.
But the guy was just strict, but he was so good that all of the students were just, they didn't do anything but him. They wouldn't read anything outside of what Jim would tell them, because that's how great he was. And
And he didn't let them read anything.
well, yeah,
Yeah,
he didn't
that
let
too.
them read anything outside. And all he demanded was utter surrender, total 100%. Just like, in some of these books we read, these scriptures. And anyway, and he had students from all up and down the Americas, and then from different parts around the world. And I think it was the FBI that finally did it, just like in one of our TV
No, that
shows.
wasn't, you're mixing those two up.
Who was it?
Waco and- Yeah,
Oh, that was
South
Waco.
America,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
One of the senators flew in.
yeah,
with
whose
his
daughter had
family.
become involved.
right.
Senator's daughter had become involved from the United States in this, what you might call a cult.
Yeah.
You might. And so they needed to take proactive measures.
Oh, and I think it was to,
Yeah. So Jim Jones
yeah, being threatened to being busted.
being threatened,
Arrested,
being arrested, and having
imprisoned.
the whole thing taken away. They served up Kool-Aid, which is this awful sweet
Even regular
drink.
Kool-Aid.
Yeah,
Can't
regular
kill you.
Kool-Aid's terrible. And just lined everyone up and said, and with poison. They didn't, and they knew, I believe, that it would
Yeah.
had poison in it.
Yeah.
And
A lot of the officials, the ones who kind of were the
they
lieutenants,
somehow didn't.
they knew it was
Yeah.
poisonous. And so if somebody would, like the parents didn't want to give their kids the Kool-Aid, they would come and make sure the kids got the
So it's a
Kool-Aid.
horrible story.
And so I think, how many was it? Like
It
980
was some huge number of people
Died.
died.
within like 20 minutes.
Yeah. And so that, it was a terrible, terrible moment in history where people had, and that's where that saying, you drink the Kool-Aid, meaning that you take what someone says without any discriminating awareness on your part. And, for various different reasons, we might find ourselves in a situation where we don't trust ourselves, where we have, gone into a group that we're thinking is going to be our savior. We have lost sight of who we really are, how to discriminate, how to discern one thing from another. So it's a horrible part of human nature that we do that sometimes. A very difficult, not horrible, but a very difficult part. And so this is the idea of, again, that we were talking about yesterday. If you cultivate the capacity to, to have the four, the Brahma Viharas that we talked about, openness in your heart and being able to interface with good, bad, and not so good things. And then also have your feet on the ground and be able to discern from that which is permanent and that which is not permanent, that which is you, that which is not you, the double-edged sword of Manjushri. Then, and you surround yourself with trustworthy others who are not going to try to manipulate you. then you can get through this kind of situation
Yeah.
without drinking the Kool-Aid.
Members of the Kula. And so, and Kool-Aid somehow,
Yeah.
there's the word Kula, which has a number of meanings. And one of them is like your family. And so the word cult comes from the word Kula in Sanskrit. But it can also mean, so there's Kula and then there's Akula. And so one learns in Yoga Sutra and two, because you're always going to be part of some family. Okay. Can't help it, you know. And so you learn how to work both Kula and Akula. And that's because the intelligence is starting to work. And so part of your homework is to find in the Yoga Sutra those two words. Without doing a word search, cheating. That's not fair. You got to read them. And so it's an interesting word, you know, Kula. But you can't help it, you know. It's like, because we got a little cult going here. I don't know if you noticed, and we've got this drink. Oh, we're gonna say it till next.
Yeah.
Oh,
it's
that
for
was the
potluck.
potluck.
Yeah.
So be careful, you know. But I just want to, so just Yan Mula Savabhutanam. So Mula Bandha, which is people obsessed with, okay, squeezing the anus, okay, which that'll get you in the territory, but that's not what Mula Bandha is, okay, it's not that. This tells you what it is, but you have to see that it is the root of all beings, that all beings are experienced. So once you have gotten this esoteric yoga going, all beings now live in your heart. Okay. This is why it's a rare thing. Okay. It's just not, you don't have to huff and puff and blow your, you know, eyeballs out in your yoga postures. Much more difficult is to place all beings in your heart. Okay. Really, it's like, even when you're driving around town, okay. All beings, even the, okay, I can list a few, but even those other drivers, okay. And then you feel this, oh, this is the stem of everybody, you know, you feel this is, you know, I connect to the mother, my mother, I connect to all being, I get that feeling of like, oh, this is an organic or biological relationship with the earth. And it's not like so much theoretical anymore. It's like, oh. And of course, the mind would love not to experience that, because then it's nirodhan. It's like, sorry, bye chitta-vrittis. And the chitta-vrittis, it's like, and the mind doesn't understand nirodha. The nirodha is just like everything else. It's just like light. It's clear light. It's Brahman. It's, you've got to be careful what you call it, particularly in nirodha.
The last verse.
That's why it was pretty esoteric.
Okay. You wanted to do that.
I wanted to get into. Should I skip to the end of the Gita? Is that? Yeah, that's not fair. I will. Okay. Mary loves this one, but I'm a backwards person. So the Gita is a very difficult text, unless you belong to some cult where the emphasis is just on, and they whack you down. But it's a very difficult text, and
Richard learned this trick from his father, which is that you go, if you look at the beginning of a book and then you go right to the end. Number one, you can tell, am I going to waste my time reading this? And number two, in case something happens, you've got the end already in your awareness. then you check out.
Okay, and so leading up to that verse, I want to present without context. And so verse 61, Ishvara Sarvabhutanam. If you have a Gita, you can look at it, but I'll just Ishvara Sarvabhutanam Hriddeshe Arjuna Tishtati. So Ishvara is abiding, Tishtati, which sometimes means standing, but is abiding in the hearts of all beings. Okay, so we're getting where the book gets there. Causing them to turn by the power of Maya. So the power of Maya causes them to turn as if they were mounted on a machine or a yantra. So the creative energy, which includes, the gross body and then the environment of the gross body, and then also all of the different layers of the mind being interconnected, gunas on gunas, they are like a yantra, which often is translated as machine, which broadens your imagination, and we think of it just like a machine you'll see out here doing road repair or something, but it's probably a more interesting machine than that. Okay, it's quite interesting, particularly if you start looking at the fascial potentials. Things. It's like, wow, it's life itself. So the living machine of biological life and forests and plants. Okay, and yantra is always intimately related to the word mantra and tantra. So those three words come together, and you can't really pull them apart. Yantra, mantra, tantra. Okay, and so then it says, "Tam eva sharanam gacha." Go to Ishvara for shelter, and by the grace that and so go with all of your beings, with everything you got to shelter, and then from that the grace, you'll attain supreme shanti, or the ultimate peace. Remember, shanti, peace is just a partial translation, but it's sham in every sense, even in the Shambhala sense. Okay. And then he's saying, oh, thus has wisdom more secret than all secrets been declared to you by me, Maya, I declared to you the Guyat Guyataram, the ultimate secret of all secrets. And then think about it, reflect on it fully, and then Yate Chasasi Tata Kuru, do what you want, do what you choose. So he did through the whole book, he doesn't tell him what to do with his kind of ethical dilemma that he's in, which is his initial question. Tell me what to do, and he tells him in the general sense, oh, do yoga and do like study and try this and then consider this. And it's like kind of an unusual thing for, imagining between two charged up armies. But he says, and so that's his final instruction, or what appears, oh, that's the final instruction. Do as you choose. And Arjuna is probably at that point finally going, okay, you're not going to tell me, that's cool. Something else. And then, but then what happens is, and then he says, and listen, he says, listen again. And then Krishna couldn't resist, because Arjuna was like going, and he was like, they're probably going. And then he says, listen again, Ishtosime, you are the, of me, the Ishta, you are the beloved of me, same word that Ishvara comes from. So Ishtosime, he's saying to Arjuna, Shrinu me paramam vacha. Listen again to the secret of all secrets. Okay. And then he says, Manmana bhava matbhakto, fix your manas on me alone, matbhakto, with great bhakti. Give unto, make sacrifice to me, prostrations, and then you'll come to me, I promise, for you're dear to me, for you are very dear to me. Okay. And you're going, okay. And then he gives this one, which is a nice verse, verse 66. And this is the one that is our great loop back into Sarvadharman Parityaja. That means all around, give up all dharmas. Okay, so you got to go back. So if you're a student of science, what does dharma mean? You got to look up all the different meanings. Dharma. Oh my God. There's 6 pages of the definition of the word dharma. But dharma means initially just your duty. Okay, but then it means any system of practice or philosophy, and many of the dharmas are fantastic. There's the Buddha Dharma, there's the Sanatan Dharma, which is the Jiru Buddha Dharma or Sanatan Dharma, which means the eternal Dharma, the Dharma that's always the Dharma when you give up all dharmas. Okay, and then we got other dharmas, and any of these, and so you are going to take all of them and let them go. And so this is again the teaching in the end of the Yoga Sutra, in which what's the term? Oh, Dharma Mega Samadhi. And this is a term that at the time of the Yoga Sutra, and at the time of the Gita, the only people who had used the term Dharma Mega, that was a Buddhist term, the cloud of Dharma. And it means like, it's like you enter, in the last, we've seen a couple of clouds recently. Okay, so there's so many dharmas, and half of them good dharmas, or maybe more than that, and they're dharmas from other planets. Okay, and all of them, they're like this fizz of like, and so the whole idea of dharma as all manifestation, even manifestations of genius, which is, so the dharma might be, the entire Buddha Dharma, not just the Buddha Dharma, but the Buddha Dharmas, which are a few clouds in and of themselves. What you're going to do is just feel the fizz of the cloud. And then he says, Mamekam Sharanam Raja. Again, take refuge. Okay, which is a Buddhist, that means don't surrender, just take refuge. And aham tvam sarva papebhyo moksha yishami mas. And he says, don't worry, masuchaha, because moksha yishami, I give moksha from all of the difficulties or projected the idea of any papa or sin that might come. And then and that's the final teaching. And then the whole text switches back to 2 more things. He said, he who teaches the supreme secret shall no doubt come to me. So this teaching practice of sharing this secret is the ultimate practice, because it's what Krishna in the Gita practices, because he keeps coming back. And his whole thing, he says, if I didn't come back and like help out, it wouldn't be good. So
life after life.
I'm going to keep coming back until ever. And he enjoys it. Okay, that's his business. Okay, and then somebody else who does that same action is also the most precious. In other words, like Bodhisattva. Okay, and then finally, the dialogue shifts, and the Arjuna says, my delusion is destroyed, and I recognize what's going on. And then Sanjaya comes back, and Sanjaya is the one who's been narrating the entire thing. And Sanjaya comes back to the blind king. And so Sanjaya is the servant of the blind king, and the blind king he's a good guy, but he's blind, a little senile probably. And his son was Duryodhana, bad guy. Okay. So unlike Trump's father was, wait a minute, okay. Anyway, but the blind king was like, kind of gets confused. And so Sanjaya starts to talk about the wonder of the dialogue and how it is just demonstrating mercy or kindness. Anyway, so it circles back again to
And at the very end, Sanjaya, says, look again, look again, look again, which is really what we were talking about yesterday. And so this message is woven in, into everything that we're practicing, everything that we're teaching, everything that we are experiencing is this really important sort of skill of just letting things be, feeling what they are, understanding them from as many mental perspectives as you can, and then letting the residue be there, and then looking again. So it's starting the process over again and again and again, which sounds to new students like, gosh, isn't this thing, just tell me what to do exactly and I'll do it, which is what Arjuna was
tired of being the beginner.
Experiencing. And when the more you do that, though, the more you realize that's where the jewels are. That's the part that makes you feel enthusiastic, is to be able to look again, to say, wow, I'm trying it again, I'm trying it again.
Sounds like a Vipassana course.
It does.
And so Sanjaya says to the king, Rajan, samsmritya, smriti, mindfulness, memory, samsmritya, it's like again and again. And then he says, recall that this wonderful dialogue, Krishyami, I'm filled with like joy, and he's just like his hair standing up and he says, I'm filled with joy again and again. And as often as I recall this most wondrous form of Hari, great is my astonishment, and I thrill with joy. And he repeats that. And this time he says, Prishami cha punaha, again and again. And so it's like implying, this basic teaching. It's cool. So how do we get all beings? We don't have time. Oh, we'll have to put them in our hearts one day.
Oh, we can talk a little bit, but we don't have time for that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
How do we put all beings in our hearts?
Surgery.
Surgery.
Some of them are pretty weird.
Well, maybe we should. You should think about that over the weekend. Like there's some pretty wonderful beings you want to put in your heart.
Yeah.
And
Start
then-
with the nice ones.
Start with the nice ones. And then when you run into the ones that give you trouble, think about that. Is it possible? Is it advisable? What do you do about that? We have some thoughts on it, but we'll let you ponder it.
And it might be metaphorical, because literally there's some beings that you don't want in your heart, in their embodied form.
True.
A lot of them are very small, but you're dead if they get there. Okay. And then some of them are huge, like elephants. I'm going to put an elephant in my heart. That would be obviously fatal. So what does it mean when they're in the heart? You know what it means if somebody's, in your heart. And so how to get them there. And some are easy. And occasionally some are more difficult. How do you get yourself?
Ah,
Because usually I am so bad, because I don't have all beings in my heart, I'm the worst of all of them. And I throw myself further out of my heart than any other being.
think about that posture, Liz.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you, even yourself?
Even yourself.
Whoever that is, of course, you don't know.
Is there a self?
Yeah, there's not even a self. It's self. How many non-beings can you fit into a point? Okay. That's the
Yeah.
beauty of the
There's material here.
yeah, there's a lot of material here. So your homework is easy. This weekend.
So we want to end on time. And it's noon. So we wanted to kind of give you a good weekend here to end on time. And do you want any questions? We're good. Yeah. So we'll do it neatly without questions at the moment, but we have 1 week left. Many of you have sent questions. We've been filtering answers to some of the questions into what we're saying, but feel free to send more questions and we'll try to keep doing that. Please have a very safe weekend. We all want to not mask up. We want to just keep doing, going out and having all kinds of good times without masks in close quarters with others, but we just have 1 week to go. And we are so appreciative of you taking those tests and wearing your masks and taking care outside of here. And we have plenty of tests. So you don't have to test over the weekend unless you want to, but we do want you to test next week. And I think we have enough. If you don't have them, I think we're going to be selling them on the black market. If start helping us out here. So we really will keep this thing at bay. This has helped. So thank you. So we should do the closing chant.
Oh, the closing chant. There it is. Om Swasti Prajabhyam
Swasti Prajabhyam
Paripalayantam
Paripalayantam
Naye Marge
Naye Namarge
Mahim Mahisha
Mahim Mahisha
Go Brahmanebhya
Brahmanebhya
Astu Nityam
Shubham Astu Nityam
Loka
Loka
Samasta
Samasta
Sukhino
Sukhino
Bhavantu
Bhavantu
Kale Varshatu Parjanya
Hare Arjanya
Prithvi Sashalini
Prithvi Sashalini
Deshoyam Shobarahito
Deshoyam Shubharahito
Brahmana Santu Nibhaya
Brahmana Santu Nibhaya
Om
Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for sticking with it. So
Thank you, and have a wonderful weekend, and we'll tidy up as quickly as we can, sweep the floors, and we'll see you bright and early Monday morning, and send me emails if you want, okay? Thank you. I wanted to talk to you about. So G,
Just wondering if you can help me reconcile some
I don't know
discrepancies
if you can-
in this translation in this.
um,
So Eknath Ishwaran has a comment to that verse 66, and you can read it and swipe to the next.
So I. she's
Condition
free
or
Wednesday.
conditional.
Um,
So
she's
So
I
he
think